You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I am Parmeshwar Bava. An action-packed bulletin lined up for you. Let's begin with the top headlines you need to know. The Kremlin has played down talk of an imminent summit between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky as Donald Trump warns Putin may not want to make a deal. Meanwhile, Trump ruled out sending US troops to defend Ukraine from future Russian attacks. Prime Minister Modi hails stable ties with Beijing after meeting China's foreign minister on Tuesday as the Asian neighbors, both under pressure from Washington, look to rebuild relations. The Indian government has approved the purchase of 97 LCA Tejas Mark 1A fighter jets for the Indian Air Force at a cost of 62,000 crore rupees. India is building its tallest and most powerful rocket yet, nicknamed Surya. Standing 92 meters tall, it surpasses the Qutub Minar and promises heavy lift capability, reusability, and green fuel. Let's begin with a big focus. The Kremlin has played down talk of an imminent summit between Putin and Zelensky as Donald Trump renewed his call for the two leaders to meet to discuss ending the current war in Ukraine. The push for a bilateral meeting comes after the US president met Putin in Alaska last week and also welcomed 7 European leaders and Zelensky to the White House on Monday. Trump has admitted that this war was a tough one to solve and conceded that it was possible that the Russian president was not interested in ending hostilities. Putin, meanwhile, on Monday told Trump he was open to the idea of direct talks with Ukraine, but the next day, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov watered down that already vague commitment. We have reactions from the US president lined up for you, followed by the latest remarks from the White House. Listen in.
It was just a no-no. It was something that was never going to happen. So they asked for it, and they shouldn't have asked for it because it was, very insulting thing. Now, they could have asked for many other things. But the other thing they wanted to do is getting Crimea back, and, that was given. They had built, they were expanding everything and spending a lot of money, all because Barack Hussein Obama gave it away in one of the dumbest real estate deals I've ever seen.
But, Mr. President, you got the Article 5 protections, though, for Ukraine. So they're not going to be a part of NATO, but you still got them the same protections.
So they're not going to be a part of NATO, but we've got the European nations, and they'll front-load it, and they'll have some of them, France and Germany, a couple of them, UK. They want to have, boots on the ground. Not in. I don't think it's going to be a problem, to be honest with you. I think Putin is tired of it. I think they're all tired of it, but you never know. We're going to find out about President Putin in the next couple of weeks, that I can tell you. And we're going to see where it all goes. It's possible that he doesn't want to make a deal.
What kind of assurances do you feel like you have that going forward and, past this Trump administration, it won't be American boots on the ground defending that border?
Well, you have my assurance, I'm president, and I'm just trying to stop people from being killed, Charlie. Look, they're losing from 5,000 to 7,000 people a week in that ridiculous war that should have never happened.
The Kremlin seemed to indicate that Putin did not firmly agree to a bilateral. Did he agree to have a sit-down with just Zelensky on the phone?
I can assure you that the United States government and the Trump administration is working with both Russia and Ukraine to make that bilateral happen as we speak.
I understand that the White House is working and allies are working to make this meeting happen, but did Putin promise to do a meeting with Zelensky, a direct meeting, in the coming weeks?
He has, and I just answered that question for you. Franco.
For further clarity, we have with us senior editor, Foreign Affairs magazine, Daniel Block. Daniel, glad to have you back on NDTV. Trump has admitted the war was a tough one to solve. He's conceded it's possible that Putin was not interested in ending hostilities. Despite this, is there still any sense of optimism regarding a three-way summit and for long-lasting peace in Ukraine as we speak?
I would say no. There's not a lot of optimism within Washington among foreign policy elites. The sense is that the various parties are simply way too far apart. Putin, for the most part, maybe ever, I have to double check, won't even say Zelensky's name. So there's no real reason to think that he will sit down with Zelensky to negotiate some kind of agreement, or, if he were willing to do that, to negotiate one that's in good faith.
In fact, the German Chancellor has said that Putin and Zelensky are to meet within 2 weeks, but we've not heard a confirmation from the Kremlin or Zelensky's team yet. We'll wait and see how this plays out, and of course, revert to you for regular updates. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us. Meanwhile, turning our attention to the other big story we're tracking, taking the first big steps to reset the entire trajectory of bilateral relations, India and China have decided to work on a settlement of the boundary question, and an expert group will be set up to explore an early solution to boundary delimitation. After Prime Minister Modi, External Affairs Minister and National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in New Delhi, the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement and said the two sides have also decided to resume direct flights at the earliest and increase the scale of Indian pilgrimage to Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar. Prime Minister Modi will attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China, and the two sides also agreed to the reopening of border trade through the three designated trading points, which are Lipu Lake Pass, Shipkila and Nathula. Vishnu Shom, who's been tracking all the finer developments, breaks all the details down for us. But first, listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Minister had to say.
Mr. Doval, I'm very pleased to meet you again in New Delhi for this round of talks between the special representatives of China and India on the boundary question. The setbacks we experienced in the past few years were not in the interests of the people of our two countries. And then in October last year, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi had an important meeting in Kazan. That meeting pointed the direction for the development of our bilateral relations and provided impetus for the proper settlement of the boundary question.
Special representatives Wang Yi of China and Ajit Doval of India. Wang Yi has been over here in India, in New Delhi. He met the Prime Minister, as you can see. But late this evening, there's been this very detailed list of what both sides plan to do. And quite besides resuming trade and resuming direct flights and opening up more pilgrimage sites and giving visas to tourists and to businesswomen and businessmen, I think it is addressing the core issue between the two countries, which is the boundary dispute itself, on which there has been repeated mention, which is absolutely critical. There are multiple mechanisms which have been set up with repeated mention of how the primary concern between the two nations, which is the boundary dispute, the boundary issue, that needs to be sorted out. There needs to be a delimitation of the boundary. Some of the working groups which have been set up are looking to find low-hanging fruit which can perhaps be addressed really soon. This is obviously huge and comes at a time when the international order is in a state of incredible churn. Remember, India faces 50% sanctions, including 25% for the continued import of Russian oil from the United States. There were signs that China might be willing to actually provide us with minerals, rare earths, which is critical for our economic development. That was a key sign, and this evening we find this as well. So India and the US have been very close for the last several years, but with this 50% sanctions, the state of the relationship between America and Washington perhaps not what it was some time back, at least not for the moment. China appears to have come in, they filled a void, and I think there's a realization at the level of Delhi and Beijing that both sides, huge countries, need to work together. Clearly there is a political direction and a will and a sense of pragmatism which both countries have embarked on. Let's see where this goes.
Well, let's turn our attention now to the multiple racial attacks on the Indian diaspora lately. A 9-year-old boy of Indian origin was attacked by a 15-year-old while he was playing in Ireland. The teenager threw stones and injured him on Tuesday in Cork County. The child suffered serious head injuries and was admitted to the hospital. The child actually suffered a deep injury to the head and was taken to the hospital in a bleeding state. The family has alleged that it is a racially motivated attack. Meanwhile, a 22-year-old Indian man who was recently harassed with racial slurs and assaulted with a knife by 3 teenagers in Ireland, he narrated the turn of events that left him injured while returning home. Speaking to NDTV, he had also flagged a spate of recent anti-immigrant attacks targeting Indians, calling it unacceptable.
That was all recorded.
On the other hand, in a hate crime in the United Kingdom, 2 Sikh men were assaulted by 3 teenagers last Friday, that's the 15th of August, causing a massive uproar. The racist attack occurred outside a railway station in Wolverhampton, and footage of the incident showed the victims lying on the ground, being kicked repeatedly by one of the attackers until he was pulled away by another. The turbans of the Sikh men had come off during this assault and were seen lying next to them, as the footage shows.
What are you doing? That was all recorded. These 2 men have just got beaten up by these white men.
In other news, External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar began a 3-day visit to Russia, marking the second high-profile diplomatic engagement between our 2 nations, following National Security Advisor G. Doval's trip to Moscow just 2 weeks ago. These visits are actually intended to lay the groundwork for the upcoming annual Leaders Summit, which will feature Russian President Putin traveling to India for talks with Prime Minister Modi. The aim is to actually provide a renewed push to the long-standing bilateral relationship. Dr. Jaishankar is visiting at the invitation of Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister, Denis Manturov, and is also likely to call on President Putin. As far as the agenda is concerned, a key topic on the agenda is India's continued procurement of energy from Russia. New Delhi is actually exploring the possibility of securing crude oil supplies at even lower rates. This, though, as the Donald Trump administration is continuing with its criticism of India's crude oil trade with Russia, accusing India of indirectly financing the Russia-Ukraine war and making profits. Donald Trump has announced 25% additional tariffs on India, as you know, for the purchase of Russian crude oil, and these tariffs are effective August 27th. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent criticized India regarding its Russian oil purchases during the Ukraine war, labeling the trade strategy as arbitrage and expressing disapproval in his latest remarks. Mr. Bessent said, and I quote, "They are just profiteering, they are reselling." He said this to CNBC in an interview, adding that this is what he would call the Indian arbitrage, buying cheap Russian oil and reselling it as a product. Listen in to his remarks.
So there are a lot of moving pieces here, Joe. And then there's the Russian oil. We have planned to up the tariffs on India. These are secondary tariffs for buying the sanctioned Russian oil. If you go back and look now, I believe India had less than 1% of their oil, 1%, and now I believe it's up to 42%. So wow. India is just profiteering, or they are just profiteering. They are reselling. They've made $16 billion in excess profits, some of the richest families in India. So this is a completely different thing. Like this India, what I would call the Indian arbitrage, buying cheap Russian oil, reselling it as product, has just sprung up during the war, which is unacceptable.
Moving on, the Union government has cleared a 62,000 crore rupee deal to buy 97 light combat aircraft Mark 1A fighter jets for the Indian Air Force. This will be in addition to the 83 LCA Mark 1A fighter jets ordered by the government earlier, and that first order was actually worth 48,000 crore rupees. Vishnu Shom has more on this latest deal.
Well, a massive defense deal which has now been cleared by the government is for 97 Tejas Mark 1A fighter jets. It's a whopping 62,000 crore rupee deal. It comes on the back of a deal for 83 of the Tejas Mark 1A aircraft, which was placed earlier on for 48,000 crores. With the addition of the Tejas Mark 1A, which is substantially improved from the Tejas Mark 1 fighter, which is already in service, the Indian Air Force will be operating a modern fourth-generation aircraft. This comes just days before the MiG-21, which has been in service with the Indian Air Force since the early 60s, is finally taken out of service. The Tejas Mark 1A has several improvements over the Tejas Mark 1, which already operates. It's got a new radar, it's got more weapons, it's got different classes of weapons, it's easier to maintain. And this will be followed by a Tejas Mark 2, which is an even more advanced variant and would be perhaps a game changer in terms of its capabilities in terms of conventional non-stealth aircraft. India, of course, does have a plan to build a stealth aircraft that's called the AMCA, or Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft. That's still to be prototyped and rolled out. But the Tejas Mark 1A is already out. It hasn't been inducted in very large numbers. But with this, the government sending a strong Atmanirbharta signal, saying that we can build in India and we must induct in very large numbers. So the Indian Air Force's Tejas fighter jet is going to be doing service for several decades in more and more upgraded variants.
Slipping into a quick break, back in a moment with the latest updates for you. Don't go anywhere. A passenger bus carrying migrants recently returned from Iran has collided with a truck and a motorcycle in western Afghanistan, killing 71 people. The accident occurred late on Tuesday in Herat province, and among the people killed were 17 children. NVIDIA, meanwhile, is developing a new AI chip for China based on its latest Blackwell architecture that will be more powerful than the H20 model it is currently allowed to sell, their reports state. US President Donald Trump last week opened the door to the possibility of more advanced NVIDIA chips being sold in China. But reports noted US regulatory approval is far from guaranteed amid deep-seated fears in Washington about giving China too much access to US artificial intelligence tech. Japan's sale of 11 warships to Australia has boosted Tokyo's confidence that it could build out a defense sector at a tense time for Indo-Pacific security. The successful naval bid is set to be Japan's largest ever defense contract, marking a breakthrough for the industry. Tokyo is now reportedly eyeing opportunities to provide ships to Southeast Asian nations as it signals to China and North Korea that it has close regional partners to actually tackle aggression. The defense push also comes as Japanese leaders look to reduce security dependence on the United States. Meanwhile, congressional lawmakers will get their hands on a first tranche of Epstein files in the coming days. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, in a statement, said that Justice Department would start to turn over Jeffrey Epstein-related materials this Friday. That's less than 2 weeks after the Kentucky Republican transmitted a subpoena to the agency to demand access to documents connected to the deceased financier and sex offender. In other news, Morecambe have appointed Ashveer Singh Johal as their new manager, making him the first Sikh to manage a professional British club, as well as the youngest manager in the top 5 tiers of English football. Mr. Johal has never held a first-team managerial role before, but has built an impressive CV since beginning as a teenage coach in Leicester City's schools program. And China's Pop Mart, which has taken the world by storm with its ugly, cute Labubu doll, reported a nearly 400% first-half earnings on the 19th of August on high demand for the toys and a shift towards higher margin overseas markets. Shares in Pop Mart have risen more than 200% year-to-date, making the Chinese toy company more valuable than traditional industry giants such as Barbie maker Mattel and Hello Kitty parent company Sanrio. To Canada now, where Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has won a closely watched by-election in the province of Alberta, giving him a chance to return to Parliament after suffering a shock defeat in April's federal election. Poilievre actually finished with 80.4% of the vote after Monday's election in the riding of Battle River Crowfoot in the deeply conservative Western province. And finally, India is building its tallest and most powerful rocket yet, nicknamed Surya. Standing 92 meters tall, it surpasses the Qutub Minar and promises heavy lift capability, reusability as well as green fuel. Designed for future space missions, the next generation launch vehicle marks a bold leap in ISRO's space ambitions. Our science editor Pallav Bagla reports from New Delhi. Listen in.
India is getting ready for making its next generation launch vehicle, and there is now a name for it, Surya. The Surya rocket is going to be 92 meters tall, which means it is 20 meters taller than the Qutub Minar, which stands at 72 meters. So an Indian rocket taller than the Qutub Minar and with very heavy lift capability. It is made so that it can carry very heavy satellites into space and ideally to be used for the making of India's space station or the Bharatiya Antariksh Station. It is powered by many engines, and ISRO says in the first stage the engines will be made so that they will be retrieved and reused. Till date, India does not have reuse capability of its rockets. So Surya will also give reuse capability for India's rockets and will also be able to launch heavy satellites into space. Surya rocket, ISRO says, will be a game changer. It uses new fuel, it uses new technology, and ISRO says once they get approval, they will launch it in less than 8 years. India's Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle and India's Bahubali rocket, the launch vehicle Mark III, have made ISRO and India proud. And now the next generation launch vehicle, Surya, getting ready. With camera person Xavier Thomas in New Delhi, Pallav Bagla for NDTV.
Thanks for investing your time in watching this edition of The World 24/7. As always, we'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.